Alright, what's up YouTube? So I wanted to do another video on the Enviro Boston 1700, and I think this is probably pretty applicable for their other 1700 series inserts, but I wanted to do it based on its cold weather performance, and we've got some pretty decently cold weather, at least for East Tennessee, going on right now. So it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and today's a little bit of an exception because I've actually been home all day, so I've been able to kind of babysit the fire and, you know, whenever, just leave it as coals for an hour or two, and the house starts cooling down, put a couple more logs on. And when you can do that, it's really easy to keep the temperature pretty stable. It's 72 downstairs and upstairs right now. One of the things that I found is that I had been giving it like 2 or 3 weeks in between emptying the ash out, and in the last cold spell it got down to about 5 degrees or so, and the stove was just not performing well. It just would not keep up with what I needed it to do, and it was because I hadn't emptied the ash in a while, and I didn't realize what was happening was basically the ash looked very light and fluffy on top, but underneath that it was almost like sand, and so the fire was just getting smothered, and it just was not running well, and I didn't realize that till a couple days later whenever I emptied the ash. So I've tried to do a better job of taking the ash out every 3 or 4 days, and it's like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 shovel scoops of like the little ash shovel. It's not a ton, but it just makes it run consistently better overall. Another thing that I like to do is use this little heat-powered fan that's on top of it. Sometimes, especially if I want to heat things up quickly, I will use the blower, but that cools off the firebox and then you lose your secondaries, and so if you can run a smaller, hotter fire by not running your blower, and keep your temperatures pretty consistent, and just use this little fan and a ceiling fan, it circulates the air really well and it keeps things pretty consistent. But again, that's one of those things where if you're home all day, it's easy to do because you can put a couple logs on at a time and you don't have to worry about, you know, getting home 8 or 10 hours later and not having any coals or anything. But this works really nice whenever we are going to be home all day. If we're not, you know, I usually just kind of put 4 or 5 splits in the morning, and it'll be, well, we have a heat pump, so the heat pump will kick on if it's really cold by the time we get home, and it'll be 66 in the house, and I'll get the coals stoked up and get another fire going. So anyway, let's go outside. Well, I'll check the firebox temperature first. So the top of this is 350 degrees, and then there's a nice gap here where you got the blower, and so then on top of the firebox you can see it's floating 550, 600 degrees. And that seems to be kind of the sweet spot for this stove running really well. And when you've got the blower going, it cools it down pretty quickly unless you can continue feeding wood in and keep a big hot fire going, which is kind of prohibitive if you want to sleep or anything else. So I'm trying to just run the blower on low when I do run it, or just use this little heat-powered fan. So go outside. Sorry for the mess in the kitchen. Alright, so got a little bit of snow today, not a lot, like an inch. Let's see if I can get this to focus on the thermometer. Alright, so it's like 28 degrees right now. And you can see I've got a couple splits on there. Like I said, I've been able to pretty well babysit it all day. And I've easily kept the house at 72. So downstairs thermostat 72. Come up here. The upstairs is also kind of a mess. It's just right now our baby's still in our room, so the boys pretty much just have the run of the place up here, and they keep it a pretty good mess. All light would help. So 72. So I'm gonna do a second part to this and just put them both together. It's supposed to get down, I think, around 10 degrees tonight. So once it drops down pretty cold, I'm gonna do the second part, let you know how it's holding up now that I've, been doing better about keeping the coals cleaned out, and just see how well it can do with like some actual really cold weather. I think it's gonna be alright, but we will see. Alright guys, what's up? So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not typically up this late, and I'm not up this late for this video, but since I'm up late, I wanted to go ahead and do the second part of it, since it's about the coldest part of the night anyway. So, long story short is, for our square footage, once you get down around 20 degrees and a little below, I feel like this insert kind of struggles to keep up. It's 70 degrees downstairs and 70 degrees upstairs right now, which is plenty warm, but I have basically had to just babysit this thing the whole time to keep it that warm. Once the secondaries started dying out with the load before this one, over the course of another 2 to 3 hours, I was just slowly pulling the damper rod out, feeding more air into it so that I could keep the flames up and keep putting out as much heat as possible. And then once all the flames were done, I pulled all the coals up to the front for about a half hour to try to burn them down a little bit before I put the next load in. And in that half hour, the temperature dropped from 70 to 69, and I didn't want it to drop any further than that, because once it starts dropping and it gets chilly, it takes a little while to bring it back up. And our house is relatively well insulated, but when it's 15 degrees outside, it still loses heat pretty quickly. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. I really like it, but I think 2,100 square feet at 15 degrees Fahrenheit is getting pretty close to its limit. Whenever we've gotten down in the single digits, it's kind of the same deal, but I'm doing all this work to keep the house, 68 degrees. So once we get down below 20 degrees, it is no longer an issue of like, well, what temperature would we like it, and try to adjust it for that. It's just running it fairly hard, trying to keep things as warm as we can. So go check the thermostat. And you can see 70 degrees. I'm not going to go upstairs. Oh, it just clicked up to 71. That's nice. Hopefully it'll be warm whenever I get up here in about 5 hours. I've got it completely stuffed full right now. So anyway, I'm not going to go upstairs just because my boys are asleep and I don't want to risk waking them up. But I'll come out here and confirm the temperature. It is, right at 15 degrees. So anyway, if you're thinking about buying one of these inserts, hope that gives you a good idea of what it's capable of. If your house is smaller than 2,100 square feet, somewhere in the 1,500 square foot range, I think this thing could probably keep your house very warm down into the single digits. But the extra 600 square feet, I think it's just asking a lot of it, even though it's rated for 3,000 square feet. So that's all I've got right now. If you've got a decent sized house and your winters are typically really cold, I think probably the best way to go is a freestanding stove, because this thing, I'm keeping it around 550, 600 degrees, and it just doesn't have the surface area actually in the room to really put out all of that heat efficiently. And the blower is counterproductive because it's constantly, you're fighting the blower cooling off the firebox. And I do have a block off plate in there, but still it's just, I think it's just not quite as good as a freestanding stove. But at any rate, I like it. I think for most people it's probably good enough, but if I were going to be depending on it 100% for my heat, I think I would definitely want a freestanding stove. So anyway, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of my videos, subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.